And welcome back to PCC Connection. I'm Michael Engel, your host. We've been doing a series of interviews with members of the USS Pueblo crew, and certainly one of the key individuals that I think who needs to have his story told is Bob Chicca. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
I know that like a lot of the other stories we've been hearing, you were a young guy, Sea of Japan, it's January of 1968, and you're doing what you are supposed to be doing. You're going about your job and duty. And what was your job on the USS Pueblo? Can you describe that to us?
Well, officially, I was one of the two interpreters on board the ship. Although that was the official title, neither one of us were very good. It's one of the drawbacks of the whole situation that we never felt we could do what they really wanted us to do. However, at the time, they didn't have any choice, so we went.
Ultimately, you're working, I assume, in that special operations hut, and one of your primary tasks is to, if any of that intelligence is coming across from North Korea, your job is to interpret that data, correct?
Yes.
Let me take you to January 23rd, 1968. You're going about your daily tasks. Where were you that day?
Well, Bob Hammond, the other Marine, and I were, we just decided we'd do 8 hours on, 8 hours off. So he had just come off and in theory was going to bed, and I was just coming on. And the whole incident took numerous hours.
Right.
The day before, of course, is when we'd been officially detected.
Harassed, if you will, or the beginning of the harassment?
There wasn't much harassment at that point. Okay. This is back in the Stone Ages. No GPS, yeah. No nothing like that. And
now they had that. It was called Loran.
Well, Loran was one of the methods of fixing your position. Okay. They would have several different methods of fixing your position. You'd put them all on a map, on a chart, and you'd be somewhere in that area where it indicated you were.
Was it accurate within a mile?
They were pretty accurate except for the Loran. Okay. And that's why the Loran fixes had you all over the place. Okay. And that's what, of course, the Koreans used to say you had intruded here.
And you were not in international waters, according to them.
Yeah, according to them. Yeah. Now, just from the practical standpoint, if you're going to intrude in the waters of a hostile nation like North Korea, you intrude with a boat that's fast enough to get the hell out of there if you have to, and something with enough armament to shoot your way out. And in no way, shape, or form did we fit that particular bill.
A couple of 50 cal.
Couple of 50 cal.
That were wrapped in a tarp, frozen over.
They were more or less to scare off things like Chinese junks, okay, which had harassed some of the previous missions on the Banner. Okay. And so that's all they wanted to do. And we were told especially not to create World War III out there. So until the Koreans actually open fire on you, it's just considered harassment. And the first day, it was more of an identification thing. A couple of their fishing vessels found us. They came in, took pictures, would pull off for a while, then came back, took more pictures, circled around.
And I assume you guys were doing the exact same thing in terms of when they approached, the photographers were
we would take some of their pictures, and I think we were anchored when they came. It's not like we were hiding out there. You can't really hide on the ocean. And so we just harassment and continue with what you're doing. And it wasn't until the next day that the Korean warships and things came out. And you've probably already heard, ultimately they had about 6 ships and several planes overhead. Initially it was just a couple of them, and we were still anchored at the time, and the 2 civilians were doing their research, and so like I said, until as Buka saw other ships coming, of course they can't hide the fact they're coming too. They're coming out at flank speed and kicking up these big rooster tails and things, so he decided maybe they had more than harassment in mind. So we slowly were preparing the ship to move, but it's not like jumping in a car and starting the thing. The oceanographers had to get all their equipment back on board and weigh anchor and get steam going in the engines again, and so it took a while for that to occur.
And we're not talking a fast, I think I read in Commander Bucher's book, maybe at top speed, calm seas, maybe 11, 12 knots.
Yeah.
If everything's working.
Speed of about 12 and a half
yeah,
knots.
12 and a half knots,
That's if everything's working on downhill side of the wave.
Yeah, downhill side, okay.
We normally cruise at about 6 knots.
Yeah.
And when you walk to your car, you're doing about 6 knots.
Yeah,
so it's not a real speedy ship. And we had a lot of people on board initially as a riverboat transport ship. It had holds in the forward and aft holds and things like that. And all those areas were converted into berthing areas to get as many people on board as we had.
Originally, as a light cargo, maybe a crew of 40 to 45.
Max, yeah.
Yeah, but retrofitted to fit about 90, correct?
Yeah, we had 83 on board. Although the actual capacity for beds on board was something like 78. There were a group of us that had no bed, and we had just could use whatever bed was vacant.
Yeah, that was kind of the call.
Yeah, that was.
I want to talk about Dwayne Hodges. 83 sailed, 82 came home, and Dwayne was a shipmate who was killed in that first round of fire.
Not the first round.
Was that the first round?
Actually.
Okay.
We'd been burning inside the ship. As soon as the first, until the first shots were fired, we were kind of at modified general quarters. So you don't destroy everything at that point. But then once they started firing, we went to general quarters and started to destroy what we could. Since Bob Hammond and I, the other Marine, were just temporarily assigned to the ship, we weren't officially on the destruct bill. Some of the times that after you work with some of this equipment, your greatest desire is to destroy it. But most of it's been built to withstand being thrown off a building and still be expected to work. So Bob had been working with this one thing, so he grabbed a sledgehammer and went to work on it, and swung with everything he had on the oscilloscope in the front, and it just bounced right off. So I said, okay, there's enough people swinging axes in here, I'm going to do something else, so I burned stuff.
And I understand any available trash can stuff was dumped in. You're trying.
Well, you can't throw a book in the fire. It doesn't do any good. It just singed the cover and everything's there. Yeah. All this stuff you have to sort of take out the pages, and you can't just throw them in a pile or it puts out the fire. You have to kind of hold them in it till they ignite. And so we started burning in the hall outside the sod hut. And didn't occur to us at the time, but we had these, huge fires going shortly, and we were burning the paint off the walls, and didn't occur to us at the time, or me at the time, but we're burning up the oxygen. So we started passing out in the halls and decided we had to do something different. And down around the hall, you could get to the fantail of the ship, kind of the back porch on the ship, and the hatch opened out. So we could use the hatch as cover from the Korean fire and get the fires outside. So you do a lot of stupid stuff. I grabbed the cans and moved it out there and burned off the tips of all my fingers, and didn't know it till several days later, but I burned off most of my hair and my beard and stuff like that, and just getting it back there and burning it.
And Dwayne was in the room with you?
Well,
yeah. Subsequently, you were a prisoner of war, 11 months, and I've asked a few of the other guys this, and I hope this question sounds okay, but if there was a typical day, in your captivity. What was that typical day for Bob Chicca like?
Well, it's sort of like they say about flying, hours and hours of boredom, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. And there was a lot of that. They did not like me at all. And
Is that part of that? Because obviously they had access to everyone's personnel file. They knew you were a translator.
I knew they knew within 3 days. I have no idea how they found out. It could have been something on the ship, could have been something from someone, just don't know. But I could tell they knew. And I also got shot in the capture, so they were...
You took some shrapnel in the leg, is that correct? Okay. I know that was an ordeal because you ended up having surgery, correct?
Yes.
But not a typical surgery.
No, not your typical surgery. They didn't do anything for the first month or so. I think they were really weren't really sure whether they'd keep us or keep us alive. And some of the other guys probably talked about the barn. The first place they put us in was, we nicknamed it the barn, but it really does discredit to an American barn. It was just a hellhole. And what windows there were covered with things so we couldn't see out. The floors were like loose pine boards and concrete walls and no heat in the middle of winter here. And basically in a one-man cell there were 4 men, and then we were there for about 40 days. And during that time, the interrogations and things started, and it became pretty evident that they didn't have the technical knowledge to interpret much of what they'd captured. And almost from the beginning, their emphasis was moving into propaganda from intelligence collection.
Manipulate all of this, yeah, okay.
And they obviously had been accused somewhere along the line of something, so they were out to prove that we had intruded into their waters, which we just hadn't, but they had to find some way to fabricate the things, and hence using the Loran fixes, they were able to say we did intrude here, here, and here according to our own records. But it just wasn't so. And if you really carefully analyze some of those things, you'll see that to make it from one point to the next that the times indicated, we had to approach some astronomical speeds.
Well, I think at one point it was at 80-some knots and covered in 8-minute period, yeah. We're visiting with Bob Chicca, who was a member of the USS Pueblo crew. We're just talking about his various experiences in 1968. If we think about those days of your captivity, I want to talk about probably one of the famous elements that I think a lot of people do know when they talk about the USS Pueblo, and that's the act of defiance, if you will, the middle finger. Tell me about that process and what that all entailed.
Well, as we, like I mentioned before, that their emphasis moved into one of propaganda from intelligence collection. So we tried to just come up with different ways of ruining their propaganda. And they would come in with bowls of fruit and magazines and flowers and sort of set up a stage and then take your pictures and then take everything away, of course. So maybe you could turn around, bend over, stick your butt in the camera or whatever. But the biggest thing turned out to be giving them the finger. So you'd be sitting there scratching your nose, adjust your eyeglasses, or pointing to something, and that was just one of the things that were done. It just turned out to be the most famous.
Right.
But if it was something written, you would come up with something that, when left in Korean, sounded okay, but when translated into English, brought out a different story.
Was part of that was not just to interrupt their propaganda, but also was to signal to
Well,
the authorities in the
that
United
it was-
States?
Well, for instance, Commander Booker created a friend called Lotta Crockett.
That was a,
That was a lady's name, Lotta
Yeah.
Crockett. So he'd put that in there, and you get the idea. But when left in Korean, it made sense to them. They didn't understand the rest. Or one time he was talking about a vocal thing, and he was saying use the word peon for praise, and how he'd like to pee on the Korean people and pee on their humanitarian treatment of us and things like that. So it got the word, and then of course giving the finger. And every now and then they would show us a propaganda movie, and one of them showed what they called their heroic soccer team arriving in England. And they were telling, the narrator was telling the Korean people how the English were welcoming their team to England. Well, the English were doing anything but welcoming these people to England. And there was one shot of this guy leaning on his cane, bowler cap, and giving them a finger. So we gathered that they probably had no idea what it meant. And so we got more blatant with it. And eventually they noticed it in the pictures and things. And first guy they asked about it, he told them it was a Hawaiian good luck sign. And after that, we got absurd with it sometimes. If we had a meeting, Booker would salute the crew, the whole crew would salute him back. And,
with that.
with giving them the finger.
Okay.
And the Koreans, of course, would be around taking moving pictures of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
Very proud of this.
very proud of it, yeah. And so,
But once the North Koreans figured this out,
well, they didn't figure it out. The Time magazine ran an expose on what we'd been doing. And I don't think anyone subscribes to Time because of it. But it's okay to do it, but it would have been better if we weren't there when they did it.
Yeah.
So the North Koreans subscribed to Time magazine, and they whipped that little booger out and see all this stuff and explanations of what we'd been doing, and
and it led to what you guys
What we call
described,
Hell Week, yeah.
Hell Week, which the
it
tortures.
took longer than the week,
Yeah.
and we just went through the worst stuff that we'd been through since we got there, and they were really upset by that.
I want to ask you this, Bob. You're prisoner of war for over 11 months. Did you ever give up hope and say, "I'm going to die here in North Korea, and this is just what's going to happen"?
Me, I'm just sort of incurably optimistic, and I had no intention of spending the rest of my life there. I was in charge of the escape committee, and I wasn't going to stick around there.
So actively, and I assume a lot of the guys had that same kind of attitude.
We didn't have a crew full of heroes. We just had all walks of life. Some people would want to go, and some people wouldn't. One of the problems I had, being a Marine and temporarily assigned to the ship, I didn't know many people on it, and so it took me a while to get to know the people. I had to physically heal before I could do anything, and there were a lot of them would rather stay there and wait for repatriation. So it was a problem as to who was going to go and how we were coordinated where we could effectively put together an escape. And it just didn't work out to actually put it into effect. But actually everyone was helping with it. Everyone would dig up a little piece of information, like where we were in one of the interrogation sessions. The room daddy, the North Korean guy that was in charge of us, he was talking and pointing to where the river was, and then caught himself halfway through it and
Realized he's giving intel out, huh?
giving intel out, and so he stopped, but we knew where the river was then, and little things like
You were
that.
picking up on all of this.
Yeah. Not just me, the rest of the crew, they would do it and then give me the information. And
Let me take you to release day and the bridge of no return. You're off the bus. By the way, how old were you in 1968?
24.
24-year-old kid. You're young. And
I turned 24 a week or two after we were captured.
You turned 24 in North Korea? Wasn't much of a 24th birthday?
Much of a 24.
You're on that bridge and you can see South Korea. What do you remember? Do you?
Oh yeah, it's vivid memory. It was Hell Week just stopped. They made a very sudden decision to release us. In retrospect, I think they didn't want to deal with Nixon. He had just been elected, and if they were going to deal with Nixon, there would be like a 6-month layover between the administrations as they change, and then have to do something different with the things, and so they just made a real sudden decision that they were going to get rid of us, and so they just stopped everything. Those that had visible injuries were taken aside and doctored up so they'd be presentable for repatriation, and then one at a time we were taken out of the cell to a separate area, kind of strip searched. They took everything we had, gave us a new set of clothes, out the other door and into the bus. And then it took 5-6 hours, I guess, before we were ready to cross the bridge. And then they deliberately delayed it. In Cheever's book, they played a game for another half hour at the very end that they were going to keep us. We didn't know anything about that at the time. And then one at a time walked us across the bridge in kind of reverse order of rank. So I was one of the last across. And about halfway across the bridge, you realize this is for real and you're going to get out of here.
I'm going to get back in the States soon.
And didn't care where we went. We just weren't there.
Not in North Korea.
So you had to slow myself down. You break into a smile and you sort of speed up and whoops, I got to slow down. They do anything wrong, they can stop it at any point. And then we got to the other side and on buses, and we all had to go to the bathroom. It'd been like 6 hours or something. And so they took us to a place and gave us some noodle soup and donuts. And
in a few days, you were back in the United States of America.
Yep.
What's the first thing you did when you got back to the United States?
Well, the whole thing was overwhelming. We had no idea. We were kind of experimental all the way along, experimental mission. And the first group of people out there after the code of conduct had been established. And we had no idea what to expect. Initially, we stuck with the code as best we could, but then we realized I was lucky in that respect. They did not have my service record books there. But because the service record books are nothing classification-wise, they had the service record books for everyone on the ship. And so you're sitting there in interrogation, they're going through your service record book. Is this right, this right? I mean, your whole life history sitting there with your picture and your fingerprints, and how much shit you're going to take from them before you own up. That's true, you know. So what we decided on was that we would own up to what we knew they knew in order to keep what they didn't know away from them. And so that's the way we operated for the time we were there. But we had no idea what to expect once we got out, whether something like that would be considered acceptable behavior. And
so you weren't really sure about what kind of reception you were going to get?
What kind of reception we'd get, whether they throw us in the clink somewhere.
Yeah, you're going
to
be in the brig on day one,
And then we began to get an idea in South Korea because everyone was out of their gourd that we were there. And the reception even in South Korea was just outstanding. And it just got better as it went along. And then to land in Miramar there in San Diego, and have, Reagan was there. They had flown all our families out and put them all up at the El Cortez in San Diego. And we had no idea that the American people had backed us that much. And it was really
must have been an overwhelming
time. Yeah. And once we got into Miramar and they took us down to Balboa Hospital. The cars stopped on the road, and people just down the freeway, yeah, and everyone's out of the cars. Whew. Good time, but tough to believe.
Did it you kept your faith in America, I assume?
Yeah, it did. Of course, you never lost faith over there. We worked very hard keeping everyone's morale up and things like that. I mean, not everyone stayed up all the time. There were a lot of people that sink into depression, and then the rest of the crew would kind of band together to try to pull them out of it. And you know, that's where you had mentioned before, drawing pictures of a hamburger or something, and we'd coordinate like that. Initially, they would just serve us. I mean, it was turnip soup and fried turnips mostly, and we'd have like fried turnips for breakfast and turnip soup for lunch, fried turnips for dinner, and there'd be like these turnips, you know, 6 or 8 pieces sitting there in coagulated grease that you'd have for breakfast, and we split a cup of water 4 ways, and very unappetizing. So eventually, we got them to let us feed ourselves, and so we could at least have hot grease and you know things like that. So that's when things like we'd serve them in sort of like tin dog food plates and things like that, and so we just turn the plate over and put a picture of a hamburger under it. And
it's amazing what the human mind will do and create to provide a certain level.
Bring some humor into the thing. A lot of it's gruesome humor. One of the guys that's no longer with us, Joe Sterling, they had broken. Well, they broke my nose a couple of times, and they had broken his, but the bone was sticking out the top. And so going down the hall one day, he says, "Hey, Sarge, look at this." He'd take that flap his nose back and forth.
Back and forth?
Yeah. And I said, "Damn, that's neat."
That's a neat kind of humor.
Yeah, it really is. But, you know, it worked for keeping your spirits up. God, we so many stupid things. The straws you've got over here. We have straws all over. I used to daydream about a straw because my nose was broken, the half side I couldn't breathe out of. I wanted a little straw that I could stick up my nose so I could breathe. Yeah. But that wasn't going to work because there were no straws. I tried to look, but they don't have any straws up there at the time anyway. So.
It's 2014, Mr. Chicca. If you look back at this event and this extraordinary thing that you were part of, this historical thing, what's the lesson that young people need to know about that event today?
Well, as silly as it sounds, I'm very happy I went through it, but I sure as hell don't want to do it again. Not many people get a chance to be tested to that extent, see what you're made of, and then come back alive and be able to put it into practice.
Does it shape who you are today?
And shapes definitely shapes who I am today and what I did. It's kind of, if I look at it, there's kind of been a disconnect. I had a lot of the dreams were the same. Prior to that, I would dream about it. Afterwards, I did it. There was something that got across to me that I could do whatever I wanted, and so I did.
One last question. I know I keep saying last question, but will we ever get that ship back?
Oh, unfortunately, probably not. Actually, I thought we were for a while, but with the new guy up there, no. They took it, moved it, and stripped it down, red-leaded it, repainted it, and we think it's set in concrete now outside of one of their museums, and so now we're not getting it back. Actually, we had hoped to get it back and talked to Bob Rawlings how we're going to get it here from San Diego, and chop it up in pieces and bring it over. They had a plot of ground, the lake, and everything they were.
Oh, I think the city of Pueblo would take
Yeah,
it
bet your boots.
today or tomorrow. So, Bob Chicca, want to thank you for your time today, and I think I can speak for Puebloans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
for your
it.
service. And, means a lot to us that you spent some time here in Pueblo.
Yeah, it means a lot to us that we come here, and God, the welcome is just outstanding.
We hope to have you guys back again down the road. We've been talking off camera about that, and we hope that's part of the process. But in the meantime, we appreciate you sharing this story with our citizens, and we'll be hopefully talking to you again down the road.
All right,
So.
My pleasure.
Again, you're watching PCC Connection, Community Affairs program brought to you from the campus of Pueblo Community College. I'm Michael Engel. This has been a very special segment of PCC Connection out of the studio. Don't go away, folks. This is a special, lengthy version, and we got at least one more crew member we'd like to hear their story. We'll be right back.